businesses in Seattle need to stop trying to cater to the far left fringe, hoping that if we just agree with them on A and B, then they'll get off our ass on Y and Z. But the truth is, they're never going to get off your ass. They're never going to be friends with you. And they're never going to say nice things about you. Let's talk about it in our segment, Unbelievable. Okay, a lot to get into today. And again, if you're a member of the Seattle business community, this segment goes out to you because you have lost your damn mind. Not all of you, a lot of you. So first, there's this article in the Seattle Times I want to kind of deal with on its own island. Amazon employees skeptical of climate commitments, survey finds. Oh, God. Seattle Times really hates Amazon. What is it about, like, the Seattle Times is supposed to be this, moderate, classical liberal, like, publication. No, they despise Amazon. So anytime there's a single Amazon employee who comes to the Times and has a problem, Seattle Times is like, front page, we'll give you 700 words in the newspaper of record. It's really weird stuff. And we got to do some sort of, maybe a study followed by a task force about why the Seattle Times is so utterly obsessed with crapping on Amazon. But this is about, the headline again, Amazon employees are really skeptical about the company's commitment to climate efforts, despite the fact they have an arena called the Climate Pledge Arena. But look, that's all talk. What are you actually doing, right? And then you get into the details and you start to wonder why this was a news story at all, but the Seattle Times isn't a news entity anymore. Some Amazon employees do not trust the company to ethically develop artificial intelligence and mitigate its impacts on the environment, a recent worker-led survey found. Survey respondents worry the e-commerce giant is misrepresenting its impact on the environment overall and don't believe Amazon executives are using climate impact as a metric to guide business decisions. How dare they? And here's the real kicker. Amazon Employees for Climate Justice, a group of workers who have pushed Amazon to take more action toward reducing its environmental footprint, spent the last 4 months surveying coworkers to learn more about how they view Amazon's commitment to helping combat climate change. The group surveyed 800 employees around Amazon's Seattle campus and other U.S. offices. The company has 1.5 million employees globally, including its warehouse workers. Amazon has about 66,000 corporate workers in the Puget Sound. Why did this end up in a news story? You have a group called Amazon Employees for Climate Justice, and they just told you that they went around and surveyed 800 employees, and those employees that they chose to survey completely at random are an accurate representation of the company's 1.5 million person workforce. And they definitely didn't cherry pick people who they thought were obsessed with the climate. Yeah, great journalism, Seattle Times. That's laughable. That's utterly ridiculous. And it was just the Seattle Times is really eager to do hit pieces on Amazon and they've got their climate lab, pro-climate type things. You literally, could I just walk into the Seattle Times and say, hey, I surveyed 10 journalists in Seattle and we all think you suck. Are you going to print that? It's just the weirdest thing. So the story is absolute garbage, but it led to an internal mental health breakdown on my part last night, genuinely, because this sort of stuff gets me so pissed off at the Seattle business community, which I feel like I've been an ally of, I've been a friend of, I've advocated against taxes like the head tax and the tax on high-paying jobs and all these nonsense, public safety issues that have led fewer businesses to be able to survive downtown, all of these things. And I've ranted before about how sometimes I feel like I'm standing up for the business community more than they're willing to stand up for themselves publicly. It's like, well, let Brandi and others do the dirty work and we'll just sit back here and look like, no, we're progressives. Don't break our windows in today. Don't protest us. Don't get angry. We love you. So that kind of stuff bothers me because we get a lot of kudos behind the scenes from the business community. Thanks for speaking out about that. Thanks for doing that. And then meanwhile, they're putting on this public facade that, oh yes, conservatives like Brandi, she's evil, right wing. And we're not going to fight against taxes. So that just bothers me. And I've talked about that before, but with Amazon in this example in particular, Amazon has tried to, I believe, I'm not saying there aren't people in Amazon leadership who genuinely care about the climate. I'm not saying that Jeff Bezos named it the Climate Pledge Arena just to make people feel nice inside, although that's probably part of it. But the thing is that I think in a lot of different areas, not just the climate, They try to appease the loudest voices on the left, hoping that the loudest voices on the left will leave them alone. And that's never going to happen. It is absolutely never going to happen. And so I feel like some of these businesses that make business decisions with the hope that it'll endear them to this anti-business crowd is just insane. It's an exercise in stupidity. But more than that, on the climate stuff, Amazon, for instance, there's a lot that I have to rant about the business community and the initiatives. So the initiatives were very anti-tax, would have repealed some massive taxes that are hurting the middle class. And I think had the business community really gotten behind at least a few of those initiatives, not only could they have been successful, but it would have put a check on the party in power against runaway spending without accountability. Let me tell you what I mean. So Amazon, again, I think in just an effort to appease the far left and appear that they're this climate-friendly company, and whether they are or not is of no difference to me, but they donated $1 million to defeat Initiative 2117. Amazon donated $1 million to something called the Green Jobs PAC, which is part of Clean and Prosperous Washington, which was opposed to Initiative 2117, which would have repealed Governor Jay Inslee's Climate Commitment Act. So Amazon, look, I get it. You got the climate pledge arena. How can we not come out against opposing the CCA? But they gave $1 million. $1 million to that effort. The other entity that supported, not just passively, very actively, the No on 2117 campaign was the Seattle Chamber of Commerce. Its CEO, Rachel Smith, actually went to the editorial board meeting that the Seattle Times held and sat on the No on 2117 side and explained why the Seattle business community and the power and influence of the Chamber of Commerce did not want the Climate Commitment Act to be repealed.
We can't afford to not have a plan to address climate change. Those stakes are frankly too high for our nearly 2,500 members and for the businesses that are a part of our coalition: Microsoft, Amazon, REI, AAA, BP, and small businesses like your new neighbor to develop.
So the Initiative 2117 fails, right? Climate Commitment Act is intact, all of these things. What happened 2 days after the election? Just 2 days after the election. Now, you might be wondering what the nexus is. I'm going to explain to it after the fact. But 2 days after the election, after the initiative to repeal the Climate Commitment Act failed, after the initiative to make the long-term care tax optional failed, after the initiative to repeal the capital gains tax failed, 2 days later, Seattle City Councilwoman Kathy Moore introduced a bill to expand the tax on capital gains to the city of Seattle.
Agenda Item 7, Council Bill 120908, imposing an excise tax on the sale or exchange of certain capital assets in Seattle, adding a new Chapter 5.66 to the Seattle Municipal Code.
Now, you might be struggling to see the connection with those things. The connection between Amazon donating $1 million to Green Jobs PAC, Rachel Smith with Seattle Chamber of Commerce and the business community in Seattle opposing the repeal of the Climate Commitment Act, and Kathy Moore deciding that she wanted to introduce just a few days after the election an expansion of the capital gains tax. But all of those things are connected, and one of them leads to another. Even if the Seattle Chamber and Amazon, with every fiber of their being, truly believes that the Climate Commitment Act is the right thing to do for the environment, and they want to get involved in helping the environment and in doing these things, what they did by opposing the repeal is they committed economic self-harm. What they did is, knowingly or not, signed off on a tax and spend climate in Olympia. Not only a tax and spend climate in Olympia, but a tax, spend, lie, no accountability climate in Olympia. What we said about the CCA all along, it wasn't so much to me about the climate, really, or about the underlying policy at all. It was about the fact that it was built on lies. It was about the fact that Governor Jay Inslee sold Washingtonians, his constituents, a bill of goods that was not true and that was built on lies. The first lie he told was that it would not increase gas prices when we knew it would increase gas prices. It was designed to increase gas prices. They have the same policy in California, and in California, they're honest with the people there about the fact that their policy does increase gas prices quite a bit, actually. But Governor Inslee has no respect for the people that he serves, no respect for the truth. And so he thought, well, it's just easier if I tell people that this climate policy I love so much won't increase gas prices. And then what happened? Well, of course, very first week, it increased gas prices. And at one point, for the first time in history, Washington state had the highest gas prices in the nation. And then the lies continued from there. When it became clear that the initiative was going to gather enough signatures to make it to the legislature and ultimately to be put on the ballot for voters, the lies kept coming. State Senator Marco Elias spewed lies that critical transportation projects that just so happen to be in purple areas of the state would be in jeopardy if we repealed the Climate Commitment Act. Not true. They spewed lies that it would impact roads and bridges and our ability to conduct routine maintenance on them. Not true. The money from the Climate Commitment Act that went to transportation had nothing to do with general transportation. It had everything to do with electrification of ferries, increasing public transit, bike lanes, things like that. Governor Jay Inslee turned around, and when he thought people might vote for this thing, vote for repeal because, they're sick of paying high gas prices, sick of paying higher energy prices, he bribed people with their own money. Gave them $200 energy credits, a fraction of what they had to spend as a family because of the CCA, just weeks before the election. In fact, the legislature mandated that it was paid out weeks before the election. And then after the election, they cut the funding entirely. So this whole system, bringing in all this tax revenue to the state of Washington, forget what it's about. Forget the climate, right? Just look at it as a tax on working class people that's bringing in a ton of money to the state's coffers. And they took that money from people by telling them lies. They kept that tax by telling them lies. And then on the back end, acknowledge that the purpose of that money, what it's going to be used for, they have no real metrics for accountability. They actually don't have any systems in place to measure whether that money that they took from hardworking families is actually going to achieve the outcomes that they say it's going to achieve. So climate policy or whatever it is, be damned. These businesses that supported it put their signature on an unaccountable government program that makes the poor poorer. And beyond that, embolden state government to continue to push additional taxes that they're not going to feel like they have to be accountable to the public on. Things like the city of Seattle turning around and Councilwoman Kathy Moore introducing a 2% tax on capital gains because they are emboldened. You just signed off on their tax and spend without accountability environment. You did that. Not only did you sign off on it, Amazon, you gave them $1 million. You condoned it. You supported it. So you might support the tax, this specific program, this specific tax, but what you did is sign off on taxes in the future that will hurt your business, that will hurt the economic vitality of Seattle, the economic engine of our entire state. Because you're not willing to put your foot down as the Seattle Chamber of Commerce, as Amazon, and say, hey, we want to help the climate. We as private businesses do our part to help the climate. But we are not going to sign off on and support a program that was built on lies. And we're not going to sign off on and support a multi-billion-dollar program unless there is accountability baked in for the outcomes. You see how easy that is? We support the climate, but you got to be honest about taxes. We support the climate, but you need to make sure that there's accountability for how tax money is being used. And it isn't in this case, so we can't support the CCA. So they have created, supported, fostered, given money to an environment in Seattle and in Washington state where no tax is off limits, where no lie is too low to pry that money from Washingtonians or from the business community or from homeowners, and where there is no requirement for accountability in order to get support for your programs and for your taxes and for your spending. That's what Amazon did when it wrote $1 million check to keep the CCA. That's what the Seattle Chamber of Commerce did when it came out, opposed to the initiative to repeal the CCA. Now, look, I like all of them. I have been a backer and a defender of Amazon, even when I was in mainstream news, pushing back against the likes of Shama Sawant and talking about what the economic implications of the head tax or the tax on high-paying jobs would be. And I should mention that a tax on high-paying jobs is something they're looking at instituting statewide. Devastating impacts on the economy. And if it happens, businesses like Amazon and the Seattle Chamber of Commerce, they'll have no one to blame but themselves, because they just gave a big fat thumbs up to the lawmakers who do these things without any care or consideration for the consequences. And nothing is going to change until all of us collectively, can't be just us here on this show, say no. No more. Not another dime. Until you're accountable, until you balance your budget, until you show us good outcomes. And when you do that, yes, when you do that, we will be a partner with you. We'll be a partner with you on the climate. We'll be a partner with you on transportation. We'll be a partner with you on housing. We'll be a partner with you on economic development. But you have to have accountability in taxes and in these programs. And they very, very clearly don't. So we are in a period of economic self-harm from the Seattle business community, which impacts every single one of us. And it's economic self-harm that they're seemingly willing to commit to appease a small segment of the left. And until they wake up to the harm they're doing to themselves, there is very little that we can do to help them. Unbelievable.